Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. For today's video I am going to be doing my August wrap-up. I only read 3 books in August and one of them was an audiobook and another was a graphic novel. So it was not my best reading month, but it also wasn't my worst. So, you know, I'm trying my best, okay? Things have been difficult. Reading is hard these days. I'm trying my best. So I read 3 books. I am wearing my glasses again today, so I really hope the reflection isn't too, annoying in the lenses, but let's jump into the 3 books I read in August. I'm gonna go from least to most favorite. So my least favorite book that I read was A Children's Bible by Lydia Millett. This is an adult dystopian slash apocalyptic book, I guess is what you would call it. In this book, we're following mainly teenagers and children as they are on this vacation with their family. Their parents are kind of having like a reunion. They knew each other before, but the kids are meeting and interacting with each other for the first time. One of the kids, a very young boy, is given this children's Bible that he begins reading, and then the apocalypse starts to happen, and what is in his Bible starts to happen in real life. And the parents are like blissfully unaware, just like drinking, doing drugs, sleeping with each other. Like the children are kind of left to fend for themselves, with the teenagers kind of having to take care of their younger siblings, and that is essentially what this book is about. I wish I enjoyed this. I think it's an interesting concept for a book, but I feel like I spent the first half of the book waiting for that plot to happen, and then the second half of the book, when it actually did start to happen, was just kind of weird and anticlimactic and underwhelming. I was just kind of bored throughout reading this whole book, and it's not even a very long book either, but I was just kind of bored. And there were also a lot of characters in this book, just with the children alone, there are so many different characters, and I feel like they didn't have distinct enough personalities for me to be able to keep them straight in my head. And sometimes we would go so long without mentioning one of the characters that when their name popped up again, I was like, first of all, I don't even know who you are. Second of all, I didn't even know that you were with us in this point of the plot right now. So I just got kind of confused with all of the characters, and I'm a very character-driven reader, so that definitely didn't help with my enjoyment for this book. So I think I gave it 2 stars, so it wasn't the worst book that I've ever read. The writing was fine, and I did enjoy the biblical aspects, the biblical parallels, I guess, between what was happening to the children versus what was happening in this kid's children's Bible. I did enjoy that aspect of the story, but overall I was just kind of bored while reading this book. So yeah, that was my least favorite book that I read in August. Next up we have the audiobook that I read in August, which was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Yes, I read this book in August. I feel like this is the most up-to-date with a new release that I have ever been, but as soon as I heard that this book was coming out, I knew I wanted to pick it up because I grew up watching iCarly and Sam and Cat, and yeah, so I really wanted to read this book, and yeah, this is a very heavy book. I assume most people watching this have probably heard of this book and vaguely know what it's about, but just in case you don't, this is a nonfiction book, a memoir about Jeanette McCurdy's life, specifically following when she was a child star, and she mainly starred on Nickelodeon shows, and also her relationship, her very abusive, manipulative relationship with her mother, and her experience having an ED as well. So this is just a very heavy book. Definitely look up trigger warnings before you even consider picking this book up, right off the bat, if anything having to deal with abuse or EDs or anything like that. Basically, don't read this book. So yeah, this is a very difficult book to talk about because it's one of those ones where I didn't give it a rating because you can't rate somebody's life experience. You can't really say if this is a book that I enjoyed or not, because it's not a book that is meant to be enjoyed. I didn't enjoy a single moment of reading this book because it's really quite a horrible story and thing that she went through, and it's also a weird book to say whether you would recommend it or not, because obviously you have to be in a very specific headspace to be able to pick this book up and read it, because it is just such a heavy story. So that being said, it makes it really difficult for me to talk about this book and review it in any capacity, because you really just can't review a book like this. I listened to the audiobook version, like I said, which I would definitely recommend. I love reading memoirs in audiobook form when they are read by the author, because you're just listening to it in a way where the author is reading it exactly how it was intended to be read. So personally, that's how I like to enjoy it. If you want to pick up this book, I would recommend picking up the audiobook version. And to add to it, she wrote it in this way where she is writing almost like she was writing it in the moment. So like when she is talking about the parts when she was a child and dealing with these very manipulative, abusive behaviors from her mother, she's writing them in a way as if she's writing it in the moment, and as a child she doesn't necessarily realize that what is happening is wrong. So these things aren't really being challenged like in the moment like they would in some other books. So I think that can also make it a little bit more difficult to read, because sometimes the things that she's talking about is speaking almost as if they're a good thing because that's what she was thinking in the moment, so they're not being challenged as they come up in the book, if that makes sense. I hope I explained that well, but yeah, it's just a very, very heavy book to read. It did slightly taint my childhood, like I said, because I grew up watching like Sam and Cat and iCarly and stuff like that, and Sam was like my favorite character as well on those shows. Like I kind of looked up to her in her like toughness and stuff like that. So yeah, this was just a very painful book for me to read, and it's difficult to talk about as well, just with certain aspects of my own life that I relate to some parts in the story. So yeah, read at your own discretion, but overall I thought it was a good book, as good as it can be given the circumstances of what it's about. Now moving on to my favorite book that I read in August, which was also the last book that I picked up, and it's just a very light graphic novel, which was definitely what I needed to read after listening to such a deep, intense audiobook, but that is Stranger Things, Dungeons and Dragons. So this is one of the graphic novels that goes along with the TV series. So this book takes place over many years. So the first book in here, the first comic rather, it takes place prior to the TV series, in which we're following the boys as they discover Dungeons and Dragons for the first time, and they also meet Dustin for the first time in the first comic in here. And then in the last one, I think it takes place right before season 4. So this takes place over many years, and we're just kind of following their time playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's really just like a light, fun read. I feel like Stranger Things is generally considered to be like horror sci-fi, but this one doesn't lean too far into the horror side of things. This is more like fantasy, really, with the whole Dungeons and Dragons thing. So yeah, this was just a really light, fun read. I think this is book 5 in the graphic novel series. I'm not reading them in order. I don't think you have to. I hope you don't have to, because I haven't been reading them in order, but yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was just like a fun, light experience after the very deep, depressing audiobook that I read. So yeah, I would always recommend these graphic novels if you're a fan of Stranger Things and you want some Stranger Things content while waiting for the next season to come out. So those are the 3 books that I read in August. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd love to discuss them with you in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!